Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Agape Lodge. I've spoken about Jack Parsons before, but I had absolutely no idea that the American rocket scientist was also involved in occult practices. In the early 1940s, Parsons founded a cult-like group called the Agape Lodge, which was affiliated with Aleister Crowley's religious movement, the Lemma. The lodge was based in Pasadena, California, and practiced a form of ceremonial magic that aimed to invoke spiritual entities and to achieve personal transformation. Apparently, these entities included them trying to raise the Antichrist. In 1945, L. Ron Hubbard, who would later go on to found the Church of Scientology, joined the Agape Lodge and became closely involved with Parsons. The two men engaged in a series of magical rituals and experiments, including an attempt to create a homunculus, sorry if I said that wrong, a miniature human-like creature through alchemy. The relationship became strained when Hubbard convinced Parsons to invest a large sum of money into a business venture, which he then used to leave the country with Parsons' wife. I mean, fair enough, I think that would strain any relationship. Even the demons were like, damn, that was absolutely savage. The Agape Lodge disbanded shortly thereafter, of course, but the influence of Parsons and his esoteric practices continued to be felt in the world of occultism and popular culture. In our number 9 spot today, we have Ophite Cultus Sathanis, also known as Our Lady of Ender Coven. This was a small satanic group founded by Herbert Arthur Sloan in the 1940s. The group was based in Los Angeles and practiced a form of Luciferianism, which emphasized the worship of Satan as a liberating force. The name Ophite refers to the ancient Gnostic sect known as the Ophites, who worshipped a serpent or dragon as a symbol of divine wisdom. The group's beliefs were heavily influenced by the writings of Aleister Crowley, as well as the teachings of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which we spoke about last time, and other occult groups as well. The Ophite Cultus Sathanis was known for its use of ritual magic and its promotion of sexual liberation and exploration. The group's rituals involved the invocation of demonic entities and the use of symbols, music, and dance. While the group was relatively small and short-lived, it had a significant impact on the development of modern satanic and occult movements, and its influence can still be felt in these circles today. In our number 8 spot today, we have Michelle Remembers. You might remember this one. Michelle Remembers is a controversial book that was written by Michelle Smith and her psychiatrist Lawrence Pazder, which was published in 1980. The book details Smith's alleged recovery of repressed memories of ritual harm at the hands of a satanic cult. According to the book, Smith claimed to have been harmed by members of the cult who allegedly engaged in a range of horrific acts, including killings, consuming flesh, and the use of demonic entities. The book's claims sparked widespread public concern and fear about the existence of satanic cults in the United States. The book's veracity has been heavily criticized and debunked by numerous experts and scholars who argue that Smith's memories were likely the result of suggestive therapy techniques employed by Pazder rather than actual experiences of these things. This criticism is also only fueled by the fact that Michelle and her psychiatrist Lawrence went on to divorce their respective spouses, marry each other, and then went on speaking tours. At the end of the day, however, I wasn't there, so who am I to say what happened for sure? Despite the controversy surrounding Michelle Remembers, the book has had a significant impact on popular culture and the public's perception of satanic cults. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Illuminati. You probably have heard of the Illuminati before, but did you know where it really all started? The Illuminati is a secret society that is believed to have originated in Bavaria, Germany in the 18th century, and they have been accused of engaging in satanic practices. It's said to have been founded by Adam Weishaupt, a professor of law at the University of Ingolstadt. The goals of the Illuminati are often shrouded in mystery and conspiracy theories, but they are said to have aimed to promote rationalism and free thought, as well as to oppose the influence of the Catholic Church. Of course, things change over time, and that includes the beliefs surrounding this mysterious organization. In today's day and age, for those who claim the group still exists, the Illuminati has become the subject of numerous conspiracy theories that suggest they are involved in in controlling world events and governments while still maintaining that satanic image. Despite the controversy and secrecy surrounding the Illuminati, its influence and impact on history remains a subject of interest and speculation for many people. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Ninth Circle. The Ninth Circle is a controversial and secretive group that is alleged to engage in satanic rituals that involve some pretty dark and horrifying things, including things like deadly sacrifices and flesh consuming. The group is said to operate globally with members from various countries around the world. I'll be honest, while the rumors and stories are aplenty, no one is absolutely certain that the group really exists. Is it fictional, or is it the world's most horrifying but best kept secret? Despite the controversy, the cult has gained a significant following among those who believe in its existence and the supposed atrocities it commits. The Ninth Circle cult remains a subject of controversy and speculation, with some viewing it as a legitimate threat to public safety, while others see it as just a baseless conspiracy theory.
And we're kicking off this list with Heaven's Gate. Heaven's Gate was a group led by Marshall Applewhite, who believed that his members could transcend their physical form, reaching a higher level of existence in outer space, which he referred to as going to the next level. Towards the end, the group had rented a mansion in Rancho Santa Fe that they all lived in, and when the time finally came, ingested phenobarbital mixed with applesauce and downed it with vodka in an attempt to rid themselves of their physical form and board a spaceship that would take them to this next plane of existence. All 38 of them died along with Applewhite. I've always had this very dark fascination with this group. I find this one incredibly unsettling. All cults are unsettling, but there's an availability of footage for Heaven's Gate that makes it feel, I guess, more real, I suppose. You can watch Marshall Applewhite's initiation tape on YouTube. You can also watch testimonials of several members on video before they took their own lives. And what's so unsettling about this whole situation is how normal they all seem. Definitely not Applewhite, but the followers. They're talking like they're about to graduate from college or something. Look at Charles Manson in interviews, and he's doing all the, oh yeah, like he seems like he's from another planet, right? But then the Heaven's Gate members, they don't sound like people who are out of their minds. It shows just how easy it is to get wrapped up in things like this, and that these are real people who go through these kinds of things. They're lonely, they're seeking some kind of community, something bigger than themselves. It's sad. It's sad, really. Number 9, The Family. Anne Hamilton Byrne was the leader of The Family, a New Age cult established in 1963 in Australia. She claimed to be the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. The cult practiced a blend of New Age spirituality, Christianity, and Eastern mysticism. The family adopted 28 children who were raised within the cult and subjected to horrible mistreatment. Hamilton believed that there was going to be an apocalypse and was attempting to form a master race that would rule the world. They all had their hair dyed blonde, they all wore identical clothing, and she claimed that she was the biological mother of all of them, and that the other adult members, they were referred to as their aunties or uncles. Authorities carried out a raid in 1987, and the children were thankfully rescued from the premises. The Ripper Crew. The Ripper Crew definitely feels more like a gang of psychotic criminals than a cult, but they did perform ritualistic ceremonies. They operated in Chicago in the early 80s, composed of 4 members, led by Robin Gett, who referred to himself as a Satanist, Edward Spreitzer, Andrew Coco Rayleigh, and his brother Thomas. The gang engaged in a series of very heinous crimes. Their primary focus was kidnapping, torturing, and unaliving young women. They targeted vulnerable individuals and would mutilate their victims, even eating parts of their body in satanic ceremonies afterwards. The members referred to themselves as the Rippers due to their imitation of the notorious criminal Jack the Ripper. Eventually, the authorities arrested the members of the crew, leading to their convictions and imprisonment. One member was released from prison in 2019, though, Thomas, who had been quoted saying that everyone thinks I'm a monster, but I'm not a monster. Next, we have the Order of the Solar Temple. The Order of the Solar Temple was a secretive religious cult founded in 1984 by Luke Joré and Joseph DeMambro. The cult blended elements of Christianity, New Age philosophy, occultism, occultism, members believed in a combination of conspiracy theories and the impending end of the world that was supposedly going to take place at some point in the mid-90s. The Order of the Solar Temple gained some attention due to a series of mass self-inflicted deaths committed by its followers. In 1994, the leaders told their members that they needed to transcend their physical forms to begin their new lives in the afterlife. 53 members, including Jaurès and de Membro, took their own lives at various locations across Switzerland. They were found dead by authorities after remote-controlled devices had ignited fires at these various locations. In the following years, similar incidents occurred in other locations in France and Canada. Alright, this next one is nuts. The Branch Davidians. This one is mostly remembered for the massive siege that took place, leading to the deaths of several members as well as several government agents who were raiding the compound. The Branch Davidians were a religious cult led by David Koresh. The group established a compound near Waco, Texas, known as Mount Carmel Center. The Branch Davidians held apocalyptic beliefs and considered Koresh to be a kind of messiah of sorts. In February of 1993, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, or the ATF, launched a raid on the compound based on suspicions of illegal firearms being held there. The raid resulted in a shootout, leading to the deaths of 4 ATF agents and 6 of the Branch Davidians. A 51-day standoff then ensued, and during which negotiations failed to kind of resolve the situation, and on April 19th, 1993, the FBI initiated a tear gas assault on the compound in an attempt to force Branch Davidians out. However, a fire broke out within the compound, resulting in the deaths of 76 people, including Koresh. The exact cause of the fire remains to be a bit of a mystery. Some argue it was intentionally set by the Branch Davidians, and others think it was caused by the FBI's actions.
Starting off today in our number 10 spot, we have the Coven of the Pappenheimer family. In the early 1600s, Germany was gripped by the terrifying witch hunts that swept across Europe, and one of the most chilling cases involved the Pappenheimer family. Accused of being part of a witches' coven, this family faced unspeakable horrors during the Bavarian witch trials. Tormented beyond imagination, they were forced to confess to outrageous crimes, including making pacts with the devil and practicing dark magic. Their public execution was as brutal as it was tragic, serving as a grim reminder of how easily fear and superstition can spiral out of control. The Pappenheimer family's fate is a haunting example of the hysteria that led to the deaths of hundreds of innocent people during this dark chapter in history. Can you imagine living in a time where even a whisper of suspicion could lead to such a gruesome end? In our number 9 spot today, we have the Pendle Witches. In 1612, a small village in Lancashire, England, became the setting for one of the most notorious witch trials in British history, the case of the Pendle Witches. 12 people, mostly women, were accused of being part of a witches' coven, practicing black magic, casting hexes, and consorting with dark forces. Their alleged crimes ranged from cursing livestock to causing death through sorcery. The trial was a spectacle of fear and superstition, and in the end, 10 of the accused were found guilty and hanged. The Pendle Witches' tale still sends shivers down the spine today, blending folklore with real historical events. How many innocent people were caught up in the frenzy of fear? The legend of the Pendle Witches endures, a chilling reminder of the dangers of paranoia and the dark fascination people have always had with the supernatural. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Salem Witch Coven. The Salem witch trials of 1692 stand as one of the darkest chapters in American history, where fear and paranoia gripped a small Puritan community in Massachusetts. Accusations of witchcraft spread like wildfire, with dozens of individuals, mainly women, suspected of forming secret covens and practicing devil worship. The idea of witches meeting in shadowy gatherings, casting spells, and consorting with Satan became a terrifying obsession. In the frenzy, 20 people were executed and many more were imprisoned, their lives shattered by false accusations. Strangely, there was never any real evidence of these supposed covens or dark rituals, but the fear was enough to destroy lives. The Salem witch trials remind us how dangerous unchecked hysteria can be, and they still haunt the imagination of generations who wonder what really drove the madness. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Witches of Abiquiu. In the 1760s, the remote village of Abiquiu, New Mexico, became the unlikely stage for a series of witch trials, where a group of indigenous women were accused of forming a witches' coven. These women, known for their deep understanding of local herbal remedies and healing practices, were suddenly cast in a much darker light. Their knowledge, rooted in indigenous American spirituality, clashed with the religious fervor of Spanish colonists who believed these women were practicing witchcraft. The trials painted their traditional healing techniques as malevolent acts tied to sorcery. These accusations weren't just about fear of magic, they reflected the tension between cultures, with indigenous traditions being misunderstood and demonized. Can you imagine how quickly fear and suspicion could twist something as benign as healing into a supposed act of dark magic? In our number 6 spot today, we have the Coven of Witches of Zugarramurdi. In 1610, the quiet town of Zugarramurdi in the Basque region of Spain became the epicenter of one of the most chilling witch hunts in Spanish history. These witches were accused of forming a large coven that gathered in nearby caves to conduct dark rituals and worship Satan himself. These caves, shrouded in mystery and superstition, were said to be the site of wild gatherings where witches flew through the night and made pacts with the devil. When the Spanish Inquisition caught wind of these rumors, an investigation was launched, leading to a brutal trial. Many of the accused women were executed or imprisoned, their alleged coven becoming the stuff of legend. Even today, the caves carry an eerie reputation, and the story of these women continues to haunt the region. Would you dare to visit a place said to be the meeting ground for witches centuries ago? These witches remain a symbol of how fear and folklore can turn an ordinary place into a site of supernatural dread.
In 2001, Manuela and Daniel Ruda, a couple, committed a very horrific crime. They were responsible for the death of their very own friend, Frank Hackert. They believed Hackert was so amusing that he would make the perfect court jester for Satan. The Rudas were deeply involved in occult practices and would apparently sleep in graveyards and go to devil-worshipping ceremonies. And you know what? Nothing wrong with liking spooky stuff, just as long as it doesn't go too far, and in this case, it definitely did. Their fascination with the occult ended in a series of violent rituals that they subjected their friend to, ultimately leading to his death. After killing him, they placed his body in a coffin that they were using as a coffee table. They even attempted to dismember his remains, but were then caught before they could fully dispose of the evidence. In 2002, both Manuela and Daniel were convicted of the crime. Daniel was sentenced to prison, while Manuela was committed to a psychiatric institution. Richard Ramirez, known as the Night Stalker, one of the most infamous serial killers in American history. Unlike most serial killers, Ramirez's crimes were very random. There's just no clear pattern to his method other than brutality for the sake of brutality. He'd attack men, women, old, young. He's responsible for a ton of home invasions, violent attacks, SA, and of course, killings. He also viewed himself as a servant of Satan, leaving symbols of the occult at his crime scenes like pentagrams. During his trial, he famously flashed a pentagram tattoo on his palm, claiming his allegiance to the devil. He believed that he was carrying out the will of Satan, claiming that his acts were a form of worship. He often used the phrase "Satan is great" to justify his actions. Gilles de Rais was born in 1405 in France. He's known for a lot of things. He was a wealthy nobleman, a knight, a leader in the French army during the 100 Years' War, a good friend of Joan of Arc, and one of the most prolific serial killers in history. Around 1432, Gilles de Rais began withdrawing from society, pursuing some of his darker hobbies in secret, and it was at this time that, coincidentally, boys around his castle began to go missing. And when witnesses started noticing bodies being buried by Gilles de Rais' staff members, it became pretty clear that something very dark was going on, but no one was prepared for how truly disturbing things would turn out to be. Well, it turned out Gilles de Rais had a slight obsession with the occult, especially alchemy. In medieval Europe, alchemy was often viewed as a form of black magic. Gilles ended up employing an alchemist from Tuscany named Francois Prelati, who claimed to have a special connection to a demonic entity he called a Baron. Prelati promised that he could summon this spirit to help Gilles with his magical practices. He began providing Prelati with body parts from his young victims, gruesome offerings that would apparently help conjure this demonic entity. It didn't work, and Gilles de Rais was executed for his crimes on October 26th of 1440. He'd taken the lives of 140 boys, possibly and probably far more than that. In 2015, in the small town of Dudley, England, a 65-year-old pensioner named Peter Churn was attacked by a young man named Tommy Smith, who later claimed that he'd been possessed by a demon. In reality, though, Smith just wanted the old man's Range Rover. Peter Churn was in his garage when this possessed Smith wildly attacked him with a blade. The attack was so vicious that his weapon actually snapped in two. Miraculously, Churn survived the attack but suffered a stroke as a result and was blinded in one eye, along with having several slash and stab wounds to his head, chest, neck, back, and ears. Churn later said in court that Tommy Smith had been waving the blade around like a kung fu sword. The old man managed to fight Smith off though. He started pressing on the guy's eyes, but blacked out after that from his injuries, obviously. Luckily, his son came out of the house though, at which point the devil-possessed blade wielder took off running. The court obviously didn't believe his whole possession story, but instead of prison, Tommy was sentenced to a mental health hospital for the foreseeable future. If I wished I could pay a visit to your city every night, at will I could slay thousands of your best citizens, for I am in close relationship with the angel of death. That's just one line from a letter published in the paper on March 13th, 1919, written by a man calling himself the Axeman, one of the first modern-day serial killers. The Axeman claimed to be a demon who resided in hell, and his letter acted as a warning to the people of New Orleans that he would kill again if people didn't blare jazz music from their homes on the night of March 19th. Well, the 19th came around, and sure enough, jazz was heard in every home and dance hall throughout the night, and no one was killed. The identity of this mysterious Axeman was never found, but he took the lives of 6 people, leaving 6 others injured, between May of 1918 and October of 1919. Many of his victims were Italian immigrants. He'd quietly sneak into people's homes in the dead of night, bludgeoning them with his axe. Then, as suddenly as the killings began, they just stopped. How's this for a dark ritual? Cutting off your own reproductive organs to appease your favorite god. Sounds pretty extreme. Worshippers of Cybele, the god of motherhood, nature, fertility, and agriculture, took their faith to the extreme. Forget human sacrifice. I mean, that's so passe. You gotta sacrifice your own ability to create human life. Painfully. That's how you really impress the gods. Cybele was originally worshipped in the kingdom of Phrygia, but eventually the Greeks and Romans adapted her into their own beliefs, and the Cybele cult spread. March 24th was a very special holiday for the followers. It was known as the Day of BLOOD, which involved a lot more than the name suggests, because this was the day that priests would castrate themselves, offering up their round little sacrifices to Cybele's altars in a joyous celebration of the mother of all gods. Eventually, bulls would be sacrificed rather than bullocks. The ancient Romans, they really weren't big fans of castration and thought the cult was kinda nuts. So they were like, if you want to keep doing your thing, you can't cut off your things, you're gonna have to settle for animal sacrifices instead.
The Anthill cult is another lesser-known cult with some less than savory practices and rituals. The organization was founded in 1977 in Canada by its leader Roch Thériault, a self-proclaimed prophet. It was a Doomsday cult with beliefs based in, but rituals incredibly removed from Christianity. The founder was known for having multiple wives and even more offspring. In total, Roch fathered 26 individuals. He was a terrible man who subjected his followers to routine physical and psychological torment. The term anthill comes from Roch's view on his followers, who were forced to build the cult's town while he relaxed, during which time he compared them to ants working in an anthill. By the 1980s, the cult had almost 40 members, forced to wear identical tunics to represent both their dedication to the cult and equality among members. In 1984, the group moved to Quebec, during which time Roch's grasp around the lives of the members tightened as his torments grew. He became a self-proclaimed surgeon, removing limbs, teeth, fingers, and toes from his followers in what he described as a ritualistic sacrificial practice. He also ordered many of his followers to break their own limbs, injure one another, and ingest human excrement, insect, and rats. In 1989, Branch was arrested after one of his former members, Eleazar, fled the commune and contacted authorities. It was her second attempt at escape. She had tried once before, but it ended far too horribly to get into on this platform. Branch was sentenced to 12 years in prison for his torment of Eleazar and the killing of another former member. In 2002, he applied and was rejected for parole as he was considered high risk to reoffend. I love it when they keep the bad guys in jail.
Starting off this countdown, we have Satanism. Satanism, aka the practice of worshiping Satan or the devil, has been around for quite some time. What's scary is how people will go to extreme measures to try and appease Satan. In 2014, an undercover cop led police to an area in the woods in Maryland. There, they found a shallow grave and a brutally killed victim. The victim had been stabbed a number of times and dismembered. It was later found out that the crime was a satanic murder. The killing was committed by a violent street gang that practices Satanism. According to members of this gang, they said that the beast wanted a soul, and that's why they sacrificed this person. They claim that they listen to the devil and do whatever dark deeds they tell them to do. And if you guys are liking this video so far, make sure to give it a big thumbs up because it really helped us out. In our 9th spot, we have Wicca. Witches aren't how we see them in movies and TV shows. In fact, there are a number of modern day witches, but they aren't evil. I think the word witch has a dark history behind it. So as soon as you say that you're a witch, people automatically think that you're making hexes and curses. Well, that's not always the case. In fact, people that follow Wicca believe that to harm others is false and unfair. They also follow something known as the threefold law, which means that anything you do will come back at you 3 times over. So it's basically like the concept of karma. With that being said though, there are modern day stories of witches performing hexes and dark occult practices that have gone wrong. Take the story by a witch named Kathy. According to her, one summer she became obsessed with black magic and got in way too deep. One night she was in her room when all of a sudden it became very cold. She then started to sweat. Then all of a sudden she saw this dark shadow, which she described as being a demon, crawl towards her. She started screaming out Wiccan spells to rebuke it, but it only made things worse. After that, she gave up all practices and had to get professional help. In our 8th spot, we have the Land of Black Magic. Located in India, Mayong is known as the Land of Black Magic. Every year, a number of people travel there to either practice dark magic or learn about it. I think the scariest part though is the history of this place. Over the years, apparently a number of visitors have disappeared into thin air. There's also stories of men being turned into animals and animals being tamed by magic. Back in the 1330s, 100,000 horsemen disappeared from the area from black magic and witchcraft. That is super freaky. And all these practices are still practiced today. In fact, they have a witch doctor that uses magic to heal people. They place a copper plate on people's injuries. They chant and wait for the copper plate to eat away all the pain. But if there's too much pain, then the plate will overheat and smash to the ground, which is quite fascinating. Also, a number of people claim to have been cured there. In our 7th spot, we have the blood drinking. Samhain is the pagan origin of Halloween. Back in the day, they would celebrate by doing human sacrifice or burning pumpkins filled with human fat. So, that's kind of illegal nowadays, but there are some rituals that some people still follow on Halloween. One would be blood sacrifices and blood drinking. Back in the day, people would collect blood in cauldrons and drink it. On Reddit, you'd be surprised by the number of people that claim that they still do this on Halloween. In our 6th spot, we have the conjuring. There are some people out there that don't fully understand the power of the supernatural. These are typically the same people that conjure up something and don't understand how dangerous this can be. Take Steven Zellner, for example. This guy decided to practice a ritual called mirror magic. This ritual is said to give the conjurer the ability to see into the future. And apparently, it worked for Steven, but he got carried away. He started using the mirror for the worse. He started to use the mirror to get revenge on people he didn't like. He would stand in front of the mirror, stare into it, and envision something bad happening to them. And it would indeed come true. The evil spirits would make sure of it. But that's when things started to go wrong. He didn't follow through with all of the ritual's requirements, and so the spirits started making bad things happen to him. His home became infested with spirits. In the end, he had to call Ed and Lorraine Warren in for help, and they took his mirror away, and they locked it away safely. With that being said, people do still practice mirror magic. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the practice gone wrong. Just a couple of years ago in 2018, an occult practice went wrong, and as a result, 11 family members lost their lives. As part of the ritual, the family was meant to hang themselves, but survive. Sadly, that didn't go as so, and they ended up taking their own lives accidentally. In the house, the police found a bunch of notes about the ritual that they were performing. They believed that this ritual would help them obtain salvation. So part of the ritual was standing on a chair with around their neck. At one point, they were all supposed to jump, and it was believed that God would appear and save them so that they didn't die. Sadly, that didn't happen, and they all lost their lives. In our 4th spot, we have the bear walker. In Ojibwe spiritual tradition, a bear walker is said to be someone who uses their sacred medicines for evil and not good. By doing so, they can invoke a bear walker spirit, which is like a devil. A bear walker can cause people to become very ill, cause misfortune, or even death. Some people still practice this today. Reddit user Whack Detective shared the time she was a victim of a bear walker. One night she had a weird dream and woke up in a fevery sweat. From there, she started losing weight fast. Within 2 months, she was severely ill and couldn't even walk. She got sent to a hospital, and there was a huge growth on her ovary. When she had surgery, the doctor said he had never seen anything like it. There was like this yellow, almost concrete substance around her ovary. After the surgery, her mom took her to see a medicine man. During his practice, the man took a bone, placed it on her, and began to suck. He then started to vomit a yellow substance, just like the color of the thing found on her ovary. The medicine man told her she had been cursed by a bear walker, but thanks to him, she regained her health quickly. Moving on to number 3, we have voodoo. Voodoo is something you should not dabble in. There are way too many horror stories of things going wrong. For example, a girl posted on TikTok of the time her friend put a hex on her and made a voodoo doll of her. Now, I remember seeing this, but I can't remember the TikToker, so if you know the story and know who I'm talking about, please let me know her name in the comments below. Basically, she was having a sleepover with her friend when she woke up to her friend mumbling some hex under her breath, saying things like, "May she never find love unless the love is with me." And she was holding a doll that looked just like her. The girl was so freaked out that in the morning she dipped so fast and wanted nothing to do with her friend anymore. But the friend was obsessed with her and would randomly show up at her house and try and see her. Eventually, the friend got so mad that the TikToker thinks she cursed her. She's been having crappy luck finding love life ever since. That's just one story though. There are several more of people practicing voodoo and harming others through it. In our 2nd spot, we have the human sacrifice. The Khan community engaged in human sacrifice for the longest time. They did this as it was believed to bring them good fortune. Whenever something bad happened in their village, a young individual was taken to be sacrificed to the gods. This was said to then appease them and bring them good luck. Now, the ritual would take 2 days. On the 2nd day, the person being sacrificed was cleaned with turmeric paste and oil. They then were fed by the villagers in gratitude, then tied to a sacrificial post. Someone would then cut a small piece of their flesh and offer it to the gods. Then the villagers would all attack and carve off a piece of flesh themselves and bury that on their own land to get good luck. Now, this doesn't happen anymore because it was banned, thank gosh. So what did they do? They started sacrificing monkeys since they thought it's the second closest thing to man. And then they started doing this to buffaloes. And in our number 1 spot, we have the Agori tribe of India. The Agori are followers of a 1,000-year-old Hindu sect. Their aim is to achieve total liberation, and they do this by following some pretty unconventional practices. These practices are what make a lot of people afraid of them. They primarily engage in post-mortem rituals. They smear cremated ashes all over their bodies and also feast on the dead. Now, a common misconception with this tribe is that they were going around killing people to then eat them, but that is false. They flesh on corpses that are brought to the cremation grounds. The flesh is often eaten raw, but sometimes they roast it over a fire. Now, the tribe sees nothing wrong with this, as they see no difference between human and animal flesh. Not only that, but they drink urine and eat feces. This is all done to get them to a higher version of themselves.
Around 7,000 years ago, a large meteorite broke up as it plummeted towards the Earth, crashing into Estonia. This created 9 craters, which became known as the Kali craters. The main crater, which is often what people are talking about when they say the Kali crater, is almost perfectly circular, and at one point there was a wall built around it, which led many archaeologists to believe that the people at the time incorporated it into rituals of some kind, which involved human sacrifice. Human bones were recovered from under the water. So this wall around it was around 1,540 feet long and just over 6.5 feet in height. We don't know exactly what the people would have believed about the crater, but I'm sure watching a giant boulder crash into the ground 7,000 years ago must have seemed like a sign from a higher power. So maybe in order to avoid more giant rocks from the sky raining down on their heads in the future, they decided to offer up sacrifices in order to appease whatever deity they thought was responsible.
The Church of Yahweh has been referred to as a cult by many of its former members, although naturally the organization claims otherwise. The Church of Yahweh was founded by Michael Wayne Ryan, who also led the Christian Identity cult. Some of Ryan's main teachings were sick combinations of racist ideologies, homophobia, and anti-traitor propaganda, with the group's core message being that they had been chosen by God and that anyone who identified outside of their race, class, and creed were children of Satan, in accordance with the serpent seed theory, which is a fringe belief that the fall of man came about because Eve mated with the serpent in the Garden of Eden. It's super convoluted. During his time as a cult leader, Ryan convinced his followers to steal, lie, and just generally hate everyone that wasn't them. And by the time police infiltrated the organization, the Church of Yahweh had collected an entire stockpile of weapons that they had planned on using for the imminent Battle of Armageddon. The cult finally fell apart after word got out that not only was Ryan brainwashing his disciples, in some cases he was killing them too, ritualistically tormenting them for several days, firing off their fingertips, breaking their legs, and even removing the skin from their bodies before finally putting them out of their misery. Ryan was arrested in 1985, and in 2015 he died while on death row at the age of 67.
In ancient Greece, around 2,000 years ago, people were facing all sorts of health issues. Modern medicine as we know it was still centuries away, so they turned to their gods for help. Mainly Asclepius, the god of healing and medicine. It was believed that Asclepius had the power to cure illness and even bring people back from the dead. To worship Asclepius, people would visit special healing temples called Asclepia, which were scattered throughout Greece. These were almost like ancient hospitals, but combined into religious temples, a blend of a spiritual retreat and a medical facility. At these sanctuaries, the main ritual was something called incubation. You'd make a pilgrimage to one of these temples, hoping for a miraculous cure. Once you arrived, you'd spend the night in a sacred dormitory or sleeping area, often on a special bed or mat. And the hope was that during the night, Asclepius would visit you in your dreams and offer guidance or a cure for your illness. If you had a dream of Asclepius or saw a vision related to healing of some sort, the priests would analyze the dream, and then based on that, they'd suggest a treatment or ritual to follow. Unfortunately, I don't think this would have worked very well.
The Superior Universal Alignment cult was founded by Valentina de Andrade in the late 1900s. Among the members of the cult were Valentina de Andrade herself, 2 doctors, 2 former police officers, and the son of a very powerful businessman. The cult's main goal: mutilation and ritualistic killing. You see, the members of the Superior Universal Alignment cult, for whatever reason, believe that men born after 1981 were possessed by the devil. Why did they think this? I have literally no idea, but what I do know is that the organization routinely and ritualistically took young men against their will and removed their eyes and reproductive organs before ending their lives in the name of the Lord. In total, the organization caused the deaths of at least 6 young men and severely injured at least 3 more. While many members of the organization were initially arrested in the 1990s, on September 12th of 1995, they were all set free. No justice in the judicial system, I guess.
The Unification Church, a religious movement which combines elements of Christianity, shamanism, Confucianism, all with a strong anti-communist stance. The group was founded by Sun Myung Moon in South Korea during the 60s. They are often referred to as the Moonies, and their rituals involve really creepy mass wedding ceremonies. Sun Myung Moon claimed he was chosen by Jesus to complete a divine mission here on Earth. According to Moon, Jesus had started a sacred task, but it was left unfinished, so Moon believed it was his job to wrap things up. And he had a rather unusual plan to do so by creating pure families through mass weddings. Moon started organizing these massive wedding ceremonies where complete strangers would marry each other. He actually set a Guinness World Record by marrying 6,500 strangers in one single event. After getting married, these new couples were then expected to sell their stuff and hand over all the proceeds to Moon. You know, just to make sure everyone was devoted to the church and his mission and not worldly possessions.
While I do not know the name of this next cult, it was brought to the attention of the masses by someone who most of you should know the name of, Angelina Jolie. While Jolie never outright said the name of the cult, she was captured on film speaking about it with a group of friends back in 1999. She described it as a Hollywood cult for celebrities, with the main aspect of the organization being the initiation ritual that seemed to draw inspiration from sadism and masochism practices. Jolie told of how new members of the cult were tied up, tormented, and violated against their will. Angelina Jolie recounted her time partaking in the ritual, saying that after it was completed, she was also forced to kill a snake. There really isn't much else out there about the cult, no information on other members, or whether or not the cult really does exist, but it's Hollywood, so, you know, it probably does.
The Order of the Nine Angels, or ONA for short. For some background, the Order of the Nine Angels was established in the United Kingdom back in the 60s, but only came to public attention in the 80s. They started getting a lot of negative attention for their racist ideologies. The cult describes its approach as traditional Satanism, but it also pulls inspiration from ancient Greek and Egyptian mythology and certain elements of modern paganism. But none of those practices they've taken inspiration from are even half as gruesome as the practices of the ONA. The majority of rituals performed by this particular cult were done so inside of stone circles during solstices and equinoxes. The rituals were considered ceremonial by the cult and downright debaucherous by everyone else. Everyone who had at least some sense. The cult's main ritualistic practice was killing, and one of the worst killings took place in 2008, when members of the cult consumed the hearts and tongues of their victims in an effort to become closer to Satan. Luckily, the members of the cult were eventually arrested, but only one member received a sentence of 20 years. The rest served 8 to 10-year sentences or were sent to mental institutions. To make matters even worse, the one member to receive 20 years was pardoned in 2023, which is absolutely insane because due to guidelines, I wasn't even able to tell half of the terrible things this cult did. So just take my word for it, these guys got off way too easy.
And then there's Matamoros, a cult rooted in 2 main ideologies: human sacrifice and illicit substance dealing. The organization was infiltrated by police in 1989 when authorities found the bodies of 12 men buried on a ranch in Mexico near the US border and 3 more bodies at another location. When members of the Matamoros cult were arrested in relation to the deaths, they claimed that they had not killed anyone, but rather sacrificed many in order to protect their substance smuggling operation. As the police dove further into the Matamoros organization, they realized that it was in fact far more than a substance dealing ring. It was also a satanic cult led by Adolfo de Jesus Constanzo and Sarah Aldrete, who was referred to by many of her disciples as simply the witch. When the pair learned that their organization had been infiltrated by authorities, they fled with a few of their followers. While on the run, Constanzo instructed one of his followers to kill him and then kill himself. When police finally caught up to the group, Constanzo along with one of his disciples were already dead, and Aldrete, aka the witch, was arrested and sentenced to 62 years in prison for her crimes.
Sean Sellers had a very troubled upbringing. His mother was very young when she had him, and his father wasn't really in the picture. His grandfather and uncle also put him through severe mistreatment. On several occasions, Sellers' uncle would force him to wear soiled diapers on his head just to humiliate him. By the time he was in 10th grade, he and his family had moved 30 times. Sellers began taking a keen interest in the occult and claimed to have been possessed by a demon on March 5th, 1986, when he snuck into his mother and stepfather's room with a firearm and killed them both. According to him, he'd also carried out an occult-like ritual before deciding to take their lives. The year before this, he'd killed a Circle K convenience store clerk, Robert Paul Bauer, because he'd refused to sell him beer. In 1986, he was sentenced to death for his crimes, making him the youngest criminal ever sentenced to death in America since 1976, a record he still holds to this day. His death sentence wasn't carried out until 1999. In his 13 years in jail, he'd become a born-again Christian, and just 2 days before his death, Sellers wrote in his diary that he was amazed at the, quote, self-righteousness he still encountered from people who didn't know him. Going on to write, "People, for one moment, get your eyes off my sins and look at your own. You want to harp on something that happened 13 years ago. 13 years. In February of 2016, Jason Dalton, who was working as an Uber driver in Kalamazoo, Michigan, went on a shocking spree that left 6 people dead and 2 others injured. What makes this case particularly unsettling is the way Dalton tried to explain his actions during police interrogations. On the night of his spree, Dalton picked up and dropped off passengers, and in between doing this, randomly started shooting at people on the street. He killed 62-year-old Mary Lou Nye, her sister-in-law Joe, 74-year-old Dorothy Brown, 68-year-old Barbara Hawthorne, and father and son Richard and Tyler Smith. When police questioned him, Dalton claimed that the Uber app had somehow taken over his mind and body, stating, "I know you guys are gonna have a hard time believing this, but it literally took over my mind and body." He then described seeing symbols, including the Eastern Star and a horned devil head that would appear on his phone. Dalton received life in prison for his crimes. On September 10th of 2015, a body was discovered in an abandoned car in the Whitestone area of Queens, New York. The victim was 28-year-old Angie Escobar. The medical examiner determined that Angie had been killed about 4 days before her body was found. The New York Police Department quickly identified Luis Zambrano as the prime suspect. He was arrested on September 18th after fleeing to Virginia, but he didn't take long to confess to the crime. Zambrano admitted that he'd attacked Angie with a pair of scissors after she told him she wanted to break up. Zambrano also claimed that he'd been possessed by a demon at the time of the attack. In April 2016, he was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 20 years in prison. On top of that, he was also convicted of an unrelated burglary charge, which added another 3 years to his sentence. I wonder if Satan told him to do that as well. Peter Kürten, often referred to as the Vampire of Dusseldorf, one of the most notorious serial killers in German history, active from February to November of 1929 in the city of Dusseldorf. He had a fascination with people's red bodily fluids and would often drink the BLOOD of his victims, hence his nickname. He carried out several brutal killings and other very disturbing crimes I can't really get into detail on. When he was finally apprehended though, Kürten confessed to his crimes in detail, describing how he felt exhilarated during his crimes. Ultimately, he was convicted and sentenced to beheading in 1931. Between 1976 and 1977, David Berkowitz, aka the Son of Sam, terrorized New York City with a series of shootings that left 6 people dead and several others injured. One of the strangest parts about the Son of Sam case, though, was Berkowitz's bizarre claim that a demonic dog was instructing him to commit his crimes. He believed this dog, belonging to a neighbor, was possessed and sent by the devil to give him orders. Berkowitz's letters to the police and the media were filled with all these cryptic messages and references to his supposed connection with the supernatural. He also said he was in a satanic cult. During his arrest, he infamously stated that he was just following orders from this demonic entity in the dog. And the Son of Sam became a name that would haunt headlines for years. After his capture, Berkowitz was diagnosed with various mental health issues, but he continued to insist that he was acting under the influence of some sort of evil force. In 1978, he pled guilty to his crimes and was given 6 consecutive 25 years to life sentences, one for each of his crimes. He's still alive and in prison to this day.
In 16th and 17th century Italy, the Benedenti were a mysterious group who claimed to use their powers for good, believing they were protectors who battled witches to defend their communities. They engaged in strange, trance-like rituals, even claiming to have out-of-body experiences where they fought evil forces in the spirit realm. While the Benedenti saw themselves as warriors against witchcraft, the Catholic Church viewed them with deep suspicion. Their unusual practices, instead of being celebrated, were seen as evidence of dark magic, leading to accusations that they were a part of a witches' coven. Several members were put on trial for witchcraft, their good intentions lost in the church's growing fear of anything supernatural. The story of the Benedenti shows just how easily the lines between good and evil could blur during times of superstition and fear. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Coven of Bideford. In 1682, the quiet town of Bideford in Devon, England, became the site of one of the last witch trials in the country. 3 women, Temperance Lloyd, Susanna Edwards, and Mary Trembles, were accused of forming a witches' coven and using their dark powers to bring illness and death to their community. Local suspicions, fueled by fear and superstition, quickly spiraled into accusations of black magic, and the 3 women found themselves on trial for their lives. Despite flimsy evidence, the women were convicted of witchcraft and hanged, becoming the last known people executed for witchcraft in England. Their case remains one of the few examples of a supposed coven being legally prosecuted in the country. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Torshucker witch trials. In 1675, the peaceful Swedish province of Angermanland became the site of one of the most brutal and widespread witch hunts in European history, the Torshucker witch trials. During this terrifying period, 71 people, both men and women, were accused of being part of a witches' coven and performing satanic rituals. The allegations centered on the belief that these witches were abducting children and taking them to the mythical island of Blackula, or Blue Hill, where they would supposedly serve the devil. The panic that followed led to the horrifying beheading and burning of the accused, turning the Torshucker trials into a very dark chapter of Swedish history. The sheer scale and savagery of the trials left a haunting legacy that still lingers today. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Würzburg and Bamberg witch trials. Between 1626 and 1631, the cities of Würzburg and Bamberg in the Holy Roman Empire became the epicenter of some of the most terrifying witch hunts in European history. During this period, over 1,000 people, including high-ranking officials, were accused of being a part of a witches' coven engaged in demonic rituals. The hysteria swept through the region like wildfire, with accusations flying and executions becoming almost routine. Political instability, religious conflict, and a fear of famine created the perfect storm for suspicion and panic. Entire families were caught in the crosshairs, leading to brutal executions by burning. The scale and savagery of the trials made them infamous examples of how fear of the supernatural can lead to mass persecution. This dark chapter in history reveals just how deep the paranoia ran, with no one safe from the flames of suspicion. And finally, rounding out our list, in our number 1 spot, we have the Isabel Gowdy Coven. In 1662, Isabel Gowdy, a Scottish woman, delivered one of the most fantastical and detailed confessions of witchcraft in history, sparking intrigue and fear. Unlike many accused witches, her confessions were given voluntarily and without the use of torment, making her story even more unusual. Isabel claimed to be part of a witches' coven that met regularly to cast spells, shapeshift into animals, and even consort with the devil himself. She described flying on broomsticks and participating in wild supernatural rituals, painting a vivid picture of witchcraft that seemed straight out of folklore. What makes her case particularly strange is the sheer depth and imagination of her confessions, far beyond what many others accused of witchcraft ever described. Despite this, no record of Isabel's execution exists, leaving her fate a mystery. Can you think about how her words must have captivated and definitely terrified her audience at the same time? The tale of Isabel Gowdy remains one of the most fascinating windows into the eerie world of witch trials, where reality and superstition blurred in very haunting ways.
Number 5, NXIVM. NXIVM was really a cult masked as a quote-unquote self-help organization. It was founded by Keith Raniere in 1998. It was marketed as a personal development program, attracting wealthy members, including celebrities and CEOs. But beneath its facade, the organization engaged in manipulative practices and illegal activities. Raniere established a hierarchical structure within NXIVM, with himself at the top. Of course, not only was it a pyramid scheme, but Raniere used manipulative tactics to control and exploit his female followers in even worse ways. The group was accused of branding its members with a symbol that represented his initials and engaging in sexual exploitation. Raniere had actress Allison Mack lead a subgroup within NXIVM called DOS, which was supposedly a group created to empower women, but actually functioned to recruit women as slaves, who Raniere would blackmail in order to remain subservient. In 2017, investigative journalists began exposing the dark side of the group, leading to the arrest and the conviction of Keith Raniere and several high-ranking members in 2018. The Movement for the Restoration of the Ten Commandments of God, the MRTCG, was a religious cult based in Uganda. The cult was founded in 1989 by Credonia Merende and Joseph Kubiteri. I'm probably really messing up those names, but they claim to have received messages from the Virgin Mary herself. The cult emphasized strict adherence to the Ten Commandments. They gained a significant following, and its leaders predicted an apocalyptic event to occur on December 31st, 1999. However, when this prophesized doomsday did not actually take place, tensions within the group began to escalate. The leaders now said March 17th, 2000 would be the new day, and that it would be reined in with this massive celebration. Hundreds of members attended at a church, but almost as soon as the celebration began, a massive fire was set off. The doors and windows to the church had been boarded up in advance, and an estimated 530 members died in the inferno. There was also a series of coordinated mass attacks that took place at various other cult compounds. The exact number of victims remains a bit unclear. Estimates range from several hundred to over 1,000, though, and the bodies of the 5 principal leaders were never found, and it's thought that they may have just escaped. Number 3, Shinrikyo. Shinrikyo was a Japanese cult founded by Shoko Asahara in 1984. The cult gained worldwide attention when it carried out a series of deadly attacks in the 1990s. Asahara claimed to be a spiritual leader and preached a mix of Buddhism and some other religions, blending them with his own apocalyptic visions. The cult had thousands of followers in Japan and aimed to overthrow the government and establish this new world order, kind of. In 1995, Shinrikyo orchestrated the Tokyo subway sarin gas attack, where several of his members released sarin, a deadly nerve agent, on 5 different subway trains across the city, which resulted in the deaths of 13 people and injured thousands. Following the subway attack, the Japanese authorities cracked down on the group, and Asahara and other members were arrested, and the cult was banned in 1996. Asahara and several other cult members were later convicted and sentenced to death for their involvement in the attacks. And number 2, we have the Anthill Kids. The Anthill Kids were formed by Roch Thériault in 1977 in Saint Marie, Quebec. He claimed to be a prophet who had received a message from God that the world would end in February of 1979. Began growing a following and convinced everyone to leave their jobs, their homes, and just cut off all contact with their families to join him on this commune by a mountainside, which he referred to as Eternal Mountain. He had everyone build the town while he just sat back and watched, and he gave them the group the name the Anthill Kids, as he thought they worked like a group of ants. Now in 1979, as we all know, the world didn't end, so people started to question him, and he was like, it's, God's time works differently up there. It's different than it is here on Earth. We got our lines crossed. Don't worry, it'll happen. And while all this was going on, Roch was growing increasingly more violent and controlling. He ended up impregnating all the women, fathering about 20 children. He would also perform drunken operations operations on some of his members in order to prove he had the power to heal them. This led to him being in prison for 2 years, but once he got out, he was right back to it and ended up taking the life of one of his wives in one of these insane surgeries. He also nearly took the life of another one of his wives, having attacked her with an axe. She miraculously managed to escape though, and Rock was finally arrested and sentenced to life in prison, where another inmate fortunately got rid of him. And finally, we have the People's Temple. Yes, the Jim Jones cult. Jim Jones founded the People's Temple in 1954 in Indianapolis. By 1974, Jones had started getting some bad press, to say the least. Things were coming out about how badly he treated the members, and a lot went on, like way more than I'd be able to discuss in a top 10 list like this, but in an attempt to escape the evils of media scrutiny, Jones convinced about 1,000 of his members to move to Guyana, where he claimed he was going to create this utopian society, completely cut off from the prying eyes of the outside world. He rented a plot of land, named it the People's Temple Agricultural Project, but it was just referred to as Jonestown usually. And Jonestown was anything but a utopia. Members were not allowed to leave and were punished violently for going against Jones's word. It was a full-on dictatorship, kind of ironic given his political leanings. In 1978, a politician by the name of Leo Ryan was investigating the People's Temple. Came to Jonestown, where several members secretly told him that they wanted out. The group made their way to a plane. They were gunned down by some of Jones's security, and later that day, Jones convinced his remaining followers to drink a concoction of grape-flavored Flavor Aid laced with cyanide. Some didn't want to drink it and were forcibly injected. In the end, 918 people lost their lives.
In our number 5 spot today, we have the Decadent Movement. The Decadent Movement was less of a cult and was more of a cultural and artistic movement that emerged in Europe in the late 19th century. It was characterized by a rejection of conventional morality and a celebration of excess, luxury, and, well, decadence. Decadent artists and writers sought to break free from the restrictions of traditional values and explore more taboo subjects such as sex, death, and the occult. They were known to celebrate Satan more in an artistic way rather than a religious way. The movement was influenced by a variety of factors, including the decline of aristocratic society, the rise of industrialization, and the growing influence of scientific rationalism. Decadent artists often depicted a world of boredom, decay, and degeneration, and their works were characterized by ornate and stylized language, vivid imagery, and a preoccupation with the senses. Some of the most famous figures associated with the Decadent movement include writers like Oscar Wilde and Charles Baudelaire, the latter being the person who wrote The Flowers of Evil and Litanies to Satan. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Brotherhood of the Golden Arrow. The Brotherhood of the Golden Arrow was a mystical and occult society founded by Maria de Neglauska in Paris in the early 20th century. Neglauska was a Russian occultist and author who claimed to have received divine revelations and messages from a group of advanced beings called the Unknown Superiors. The Brotherhood was based on the principles of the third term of the Trinity, which proposed a union of the masculine and feminine principles through the agency of a third neutral principle, and they also worshipped Lucifer, the serpent. The group practiced a form of sexual mysticism that they believed would lead to the attainment of higher consciousness and spiritual enlightenment. Members of the Brotherhood were known as initiates and participated in rituals that involved the use of symbols, music, dance, and sexual practices. The group was highly secretive and attracted a small but devoted following of intellectuals, artists, and writers. In our number 3 spot today, we have Procter & Gamble. Okay, not a cult, but a huge company. There has long been urban legends surrounding this company that suggest it is related to Satanism. I will say these are just rumors and conspiracies, and many people have done the work to try and debunk them, but when I came across this wild theory, I just had to share it with you. The idea that the former CEO of Procter & Gamble, John Smale, was involved in Satanism is a well-known conspiracy theory that has been circulating for decades, and the theory is based on the company's logo, which allegedly includes a depiction of Satan or the devil. People claim that John went on national television and shared how happy he was that the United States was so open-minded because now he could admit that the company had donated large sums of their profits to satanic cults. While no one has been able to produce a tape of him saying this, I just think this absolutely wild rumor was one worth sharing. I mean, who Who really knows? The conspiracy theory about Smale's supposed involvement in Satanism is believed to have originated from a rival company, Amway, which spread false rumors about Procter & Gamble in an attempt to damage its reputation. Despite being debunked numerous times, the rumor has persisted and continues to be spread by conspiracy theorists and anti-occult groups. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Process Church of the Final Judgment. This church was a religious cult that emerged in the 1960s and 1970s. The group was founded in the United Kingdom by Mary Ann McLean and Robert de Grimston, and it combined elements of Christianity, Satanism, and the occult. The group believed in a dualistic worldview in which Satan and Christ were seen as complementary forces. The Process Church also had a strong focus on apocalyptic themes and believed that the end of the world was imminent. The group's rituals were often performed in black robes and involved chanting, dancing, and other forms of ecstatic practices. Despite its controversial beliefs, the group gained a following in the United States and attracted several high-profile celebrities. However, the group's controversial beliefs and practices eventually led to its decline, and it disbanded in the 1970s. Today, the legacy of the Process Church continues to fascinate and intrigue those interested in the history of religious cults. Finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have Catherine Monvosian. During the reign of Louis XIV, poison was one of those things that you really just had to worry about. It was on the rise as an easy and sneaky way to take people out and to change the course of inheritance and influence. Because of the worries surrounding possible poisonings and stories of people close to the king doing some shady stuff, investigations began. It was soon found out that the king's chief mistress, the Marquis de Montespan, was said to be quite the client of Catherine. Catherine was a Parisian salesperson who sold powders and potions that were meant to catch the attention for the king. You know, love potion stuff. And among these love potion stories were also the stories of horrifying rituals and rites in order to get these alleged powers. These stories, of course, terrified the king, and this led for him to order Catherine to be burned at the stake. And not only this, but hundreds of others were implicated as well. Some passed from the conditions they were being held under, others were executed, and some saw punishments that spared their lives, but their reputations were forever tarnished. For the chief mistress, however, well, although she was connected to this entire ordeal, she was the mother of several of the king's children, and because of this close connection to the king, she wasn't arrested or tried. Instead, though, she was retired and sent to a convent to live the rest of her life. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thanks so much for checking it out. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and I will see you again soon. Bye!
Want to see more videos like this one? Check out this video next. It's all about mermaids that were captured on camera. Pretty intriguing, right? So what do you think? Is the footage real or fake? Click the video now to find out more and let us know what you decide. What are you waiting for? Click the video now.